Well, good morning. Let's try again. Good morning. Thanks. Thank you. Warren, thank you. And congratulations. It's just stunning what UMBC is doing. And you're to be commended as well as everybody associated. Science, technology, engineering, and math. Obviously one of the critical needs for our country as we compete on a global scale. How do we address the shortage, if you will, of engineers in the United States versus the rest of the world? And part of that is we have to produce the leaders. And UMBC is doing a fantastic job of turning them out. And it's great for the country and obviously great for this region. So thank you. Just tremendous leadership. Not only is it critical for the nation, but for each of us, I'd like to talk about what does transformational leadership look like in the context of our work in IT. I'm a technologist by training. There are about 10,000 engineers inside of Harris Corporation. I can tell you when I'm with them, I am not counted among them. But I do have that background. I've worked in hardware, software, worked on a space shuttle. I've worked in aerospace, intelligence, IT, and now in healthcare. From a business side, I've got about 25 years in both government and commercial. Augmented by an MBA. But my greatest sense of fulfillment or achievement isn't derived from anything that's happened to me academically or professionally, but it's been a result of my significant challenges in healthcare. And UMBC is doing great work, and it's been recognized, and it's why we're all here. But the other reason that we're all here is we want to be great at what we do. And I was talking to some of the students, the passion, and Daniel's talking about, I just can't wait to get out. There's a world waiting for me. I want to go impact. You want to change the world, and my generation's counting on your success, and we're here to help you. But a couple takeaways that I'd like you to think about over the course of our conversation this morning. You can't get there by yourself. You're going to need mentors. You're going to need people like this. You look around the business community, and we're here to support you, to encourage you, to challenge you, to shape you, and then the reverse is true. We need you to do that for us. Help us think differently, think with a fresh perspective, to get out of our locked-in ways of doing things, and think about how do we transform a future from where we are today to a future state that will allow us to be not only competitive but transformational in our impact. There's a book, if you were inside the Harris healthcare business, you would have read Blueprint to $1 billion. And in that book, it talks about ideas that became companies that went public, that made it to $1 billion. What were the common elements of those businesses? One of them, and that we've really tried to emphasize in our business, is that it's never one person. And all of a sudden, your mind starts racing to even names of companies, and it leads you to that conclusion. Things like Hewlett-Packard, Sears and Roebuck, Microsoft with Gates and Allen. At Apple, you've got Steve Wozniak and Jobs, right? I mean, it's a team, and it's a diversity of perspective, driving towards a future state, and doing something that you could never have done on your own. And we come to a place like UMBC, we're trying to get equipped to go accomplish our life's mission. And I want to talk about a little, what do we need to become leaders? And it's the resolve to take all that you're learning, all that you know, and all that you are, and apply it against all that you encounter in your life. And opportunities for transformation, they often stem from the convergence of our preparation and our experience. And turning potential into reality in this dimension, it requires great discipline, sometimes courage, for sure conviction, and a passion to make it into, to take that intersection and turn it into transformational impact and living. I mean, we hear stories all the time in business that, you're just in the right place at the right time. Now, I always hope for that. So far, it hasn't happened. I think oftentimes it's different. And sometimes in our greatest challenge, we find our most significant opportunity. It was July 19th. I was standing at the Dome at Johns Hopkins with my great friend and neighbor, Frank Finelli. Frank is a retired Army lieutenant colonel, a ranger, sort of a man's man. And this day was different. He's confronting a day where he could possibly lose his life. I'm trying to encourage him, come up with find the right words, if you will, to try to help him prepare for what he's about to face. And, this day, one of our nation's heroes confronting his own mortality, not in a battlefield, but in an operating room. We went upstairs and waited in a pre-op surgical unit, and the nurses came in and out, bringing him his medications, checking his vital signs, putting in an IV, and just making sure he was okay. And then about 7 o'clock, the doctor walked in and said, "It's time." Frank stood up as if on cue. We awkwardly embraced, and then with tears in his eyes, I saw him kiss his wife goodbye and be wheeled away to an operating room where he would risk his life for mine. I'll never get over it. I don't want to get over it. And I'm hoping by the time we're through, you won't be able to get over it either. I was watching Monday Night Football, and the host, Al Michael, was interviewing Mike Singletary, Hall of Fame linebacker for the Bears, and now he's coaching the 49ers. And they were talking about Walter Payton, but not that at the time he was the NFL's all-time leading rusher or that the great Super Bowl season, but that day, Walter Payton died of a very rare liver disease. And the irony was, I was laying in a hospital bed at Johns Hopkins as a result of that same disease. Circumstances so dire, yet so many chose to pull us through. We eventually had to ask the question, is it possible that the crucible of life could be an agent of grace? The disease is called primary sclerosing cholangitis. No test, you don't have to write it down or anything. But basically, it's your immune system becomes overactive, it begins to attack things that are healthy, it loses its ability to discriminate, and it affects your digestive system and your liver. Medically, they can contain its effects, but there is no cure. Well, I travel a lot with my work, and I was in Melbourne, Florida, and I played 2 sports in college. I was always very active, but I was at a point in my life where I'm driving home from work, and I'm so tired I have to pull off on the side of the road and rest so I can make it home. I thought, I'm going to graduate school. I'm burning the candle at both ends, just too much. My wife said, you haven't had a physical, since you were in college. You probably should just go get checked. And it took about 18 months before we can get vectored over to Johns Hopkins to find somebody that had any idea what was going on. I went under a protocol of treatment for about 10 years, and now here I am on a business trip in Florida. And I get a call from my lead physician. And he said, Jim, we've been doing a great job of managing your disease, but the most recent tests show that it's broken through. And you're going to need a liver transplant. I was stunned. I was in my 30s at the time, and I knew it was possible with this disease that this could be an outcome, but I thought more likely like in my 50s maybe, but not now. And then I'm thinking, well, I got to call my wife. I'm not sure you could just call her. So I waited till I got back home and tried to find, the right time, if there is such a thing, and explain to her what happened. And we cried, we prayed, we tried to prepare each other for what might lie ahead. And I soon began to go through what turned out to be months of testing. And the testing was twofold: to get me qualified to go on a transplant list, and there's a series of tests, each of them increasing in risk, progressively more invasive, some of them life-threatening in and of themselves. And the second one was to verify that I didn't already have cancer, and I was in the same scenario as Walter Payton. And because they couldn't conclusively eliminate this possibility of cancer, I had to take these tests over and over and over. So 4 months into the process, the doctors come in and say, we're going to put you on the list. We still can't rule out cancer. We think there's a 30% chance you might have it, but we won't know until we do the surgery, but the best we could do now is put you on that list. Well, I could tell you, I went from being panicked that I needed a transplant to just thrilled that I could get one. And I went down this path that I describe as the corridor of death. And it looks something like this. You first get word that you're confronting your own mortality, and in my case, I might even have a fixed end date. And all of a sudden, there's clarity. And you might imagine this to be true. But the things you spend the majority of your time with are the first you jettison. So your career and your possessions, immediately, they move to the back. You walk a little further, and you say goodbye to your friends. A little further still, and you say goodbye to your extended family. A little further still, your parents. And then it gets really hard. You say goodbye to your children. You say goodbye to your wife. And then you stand alone at the edge of life with the one who made you. I just want to tell you that that's an incredible place to be. At the first meeting subsequent to that milestone, I'm with a team of doctors at Hopkins, and they're explaining to me what it's going to be like to go on the list. They said, your health is going to deteriorate over time, and you will As you get sicker, you're going to move up in priority to be the top candidate to receive a deceased donor liver. And they said it'll take probably 2 to 3 years for that process to complete. But your problem is the wait. We think that your disease will turn to cancer during that time, and instead of moving up in priority, you're going to come off the list. So you need to find a living donor. Now, I know we're all IT folks here and not necessarily medical folks, but the one thing, I got a C in science, but I did know this: you only have one liver. So I say to the doctor, who am I supposed to approach on this topic? And they'd explain to me what would happen. Literally what they do, there's a way that they could do the surgery. There's a natural divide, and essentially you take about half of the liver mass, half of the arterial flow in the bile ducts, and they would transplant that into me. The liver mass regenerates. It's the only organ that does that in both the donor and the recipient, and so that's how it works. And still, the question is a pretty dramatic one, and I don't even know where to start. And they said, well, do you have any siblings? I said, I've got 4 sisters, but they're younger than me, newly married. They've got small children. I can't ask them to do this. And they said, Jim, we can't tell you what to do. All we can do is give you our best medical counsel. It's up for you to decide how you want to proceed. Now, I want you to think about this. There's an emotional weight here that what do I do if I try to wait this out and see if I can make it through the list and I develop cancer? What do I say to Gwen and the kids? I had an opportunity, but I didn't take it. I'm sorry. On the other hand, what if I allow somebody to intervene and they die in the process? How could I ever live with myself? And this is what we were facing. So Gwen and I, we drove back to Virginia, agonizing over, well, what do we do now that we heard this news? It's just like striking. We went from excited that it was possible to now it just seemed overwhelming. So obviously we call our parents. I sent a note to my great friend, Michael, my 4 sisters, living donor, just. The next day I get a call from Michael Easley. And he said, Jim, don't worry about your sisters. I'm going to do this for you. And you never asked, so you can't say no. I said, Michael, you're crazy. You don't even know what you're signing up for. He had just adopted 2 in the inner city in D.C. He had 4 children. Now I said, what about Cindy? And you can imagine the emotion here is high. And he said, these are his words. He said, Jim, we're just going to start down a path. If God has a different plan, he'll show us. Next thing you know, it's Michael and Cindy and Gwen and I going back and forth to Hopkins. So I drive them up there, and, I've been going to Hopkins for 10 years, so I know where to take him. I drop him off the door. I'm going to park and thinking, well, I need to get in there and get him acclimated and in the right place. By the time I get in there, this guy's determined. He's already in a gown. He's up there getting ready to take the first 2 of 6 tests. The day completes. Now, I have to be there, and he doesn't. And I mentioned this corridor, and it gets a little bit raw. The further down you go, I got to tell you, little things mean a lot. But when you watch somebody suffer on your behalf, it is overwhelming. We're driving back at the end of the day, and Michael was a pastor at a large church in Virginia. We were dropping him off. He had a wedding rehearsal to attend to, and we're now taking Cindy home. And I say that everybody needs a Cindy Easley in their life. She's the kind of person that if someone else said the things that she did, it would hurt your feelings. But when she says it, somehow it's endearing. And so we're driving home, and I said, Cindy, I appreciate all that you're trying to do for us. It's just too much. We're not going to let you keep going. She spins around and puts a finger on my chest, and she said, you know what your problem is? You don't know how to receive. You're so busy stiff-arming everybody that's trying to help you. And if Michael feels led to do this for you, it's not fair for you to deny us the blessing. Michael finishes all the tests. It's now Tuesday. The surgery's the following Monday. They have 2 adjacent operating rooms, 2 teams of surgeons. We're in this briefing called pre-op, where they begin to describe what it'll be like for Michael as the donor, what it's like for me as the recipient. It's a 12 to 14-hour surgery. Michael has to go first. They operate on him for 2.5 hours, and then I go in. In the middle of this discussion, in walks the head of the Living Donor Program, and they said, guys, we got to call it off. Michael, the test you'd run yesterday showed the vascular structure of your liver won't work for Jim. We think you'll be okay in the surgery, but there's already so much risk. Well, we were going to be the 4th to have this done, the first that weren't related. And they said, we just don't think it's prudent to keep going. So they called it off. So we were obviously disappointed, not really knowing what it meant, but we're guys. We compartmentalize. I think we even stopped at an auto parts place on the way home. But we get to his house, and Cindy comes out on the porch to see how things are going, and I stuck my hand out to thank my friend. And it's a little bit embarrassing, but it's what happened. We cried like boys. Michael, because it wouldn't be him in the operating room. I still, to this day, don't understand that. For me, I was relieved that he wouldn't have to suffer on my behalf. I didn't know what the future held, but that's where we were. I went home, and I got a call from my sister that afternoon. She said, Jimmy, I couldn't do this for you a month ago, but I could do it for you now. I'll be there tomorrow. I'll take all those tests that take weeks. I'm going to do them in days. Don't change that surgery date on Monday. I'll be there. I won't even have time to think about it. We'll just do the test. I'll do the surgery. Now, my sister's afraid of needles, let alone doing something like this. She flies down. She takes all the tests. Perfect match. The doctors are thrilled. She's terrified. She now has to go home and say goodbye to her children and her husband and get ready for surgery on Monday. My parents are driving to meet us, and now they have 2 children going into surgery on Monday. Saturday comes, and my sister calls, and she said, I want to do this for you in the worst way. I just can't. And we didn't want her to, having all the angst about not doing. You don't want anybody involved, and you're trying to help her navigate through this. It's too much to ask of anybody. And then my neighbor comes over from across the street that night. It's Frank. He walks into my den, and he said, Jim, I'm really sorry to hear about everything that happened this week, but I want to be your donor. I'm on a roller coaster here. And I said, Frank, you don't even know what you're signing up for. This is crazy. I just said goodbye to his family the week before. And he said, yes, I do. He said, I've never been sick, and maybe this is why. And I'm going to be your donor. He just would not relinquish it. Next thing you know, it's Frank and I going back and forth to Hopkins. I later find out from his wife that he said to her, I can't just sit across the street and watch him die. That's the kind of guy Frank Finelli is. We go through all the tests. It's a match. It's now July 19th. We're standing at the Dome at Hopkins, 5:30 in the morning, arms around each other's shoulder, trying to encourage each other, pray for our families, ask for the grace sufficient to deal with whatever we're facing, not knowing what it would be. And we go upstairs, and we're sitting there. And I got to tell you, it's a little bit awkward when you're sitting across an operating waiting area with your neighbor dressed in a gown. So I'm staring at Frank. He's staring at me. And Frank and I sort of look alike. And this is a fact about which I've tried to console him. But we're standing there, and it occurs to me. I said, Frank, whatever you do, don't fall asleep now, because if they take me first and throw out your liver, we're both history. And then I'll never forget it when the doctor came in and at 7 o'clock and said, it's time. And Frank went down the operating room to risk his life for mine. Just incredible. Well, let me talk about lessons learned and map this to why we're here. And I want to first tell you how Frank's doing. He's doing terrific. As you might imagine, we went from neighbors to closer than brothers. I see him a couple times a week. I cut his grass for about 2 years. I can't do enough for the guy, he just can't believe what he did for me. And I imagine there are times where he thinks, what the heck was I thinking? But he's just an amazing guy. He's working at the Carlisle Group as a managing director. I always say that I'm chasing contracts in the federal space, and Frank is redefining what the federal space looks like as he works M&A for Carlisle. But let me tell you some of the things we learned. When we were going into the surgery, in the pre-op briefing, they said surgery is science, medication is art. We're going to try to balance your immune system so it doesn't reject, so we have to suppress it, but not so much that you're open to infection. Both of them could be lethal, but we'll treat them if it happens. Well, I was supposed to be in intensive care for 2 weeks. Turns out I'm ready to go home in 6 days. And the doctors come in and said, it's time to go home. Well, Frank's struggling. I said, I came in with Finelli. I'm going home with Finelli. And the doctor looks at me and says, this isn't exactly a hotel. You can't, just stay. And he said, I'll tell you what, you could stay another day or so. We'll trend your blood work, see how you're doing. And while I was waiting for Frank to get better, I got worse. I went into rejection, and they couldn't stop it. And they said, after several attempts, they said, we're going to have to bring out what they describe as the big guns. We're going to give you a shot. We don't know if it'll cure you or kill you. We'll know in 20 minutes. My thought exactly, technology, business, what is plan B? And there wasn't one. I had to do it. So I'm in the hospital for a month, quarantined, most expensive, high risk kind of care you can get. I finally get to go home. I'm home for a couple of weeks. It happens again. I get rushed back to the hospital. This time I don't get to say goodbye to my children. They start the treatment again. Your immune system recognizes the previous medicine, so they created a new one. I'm the first to take it. Same speech. I'm in the hospital for a month. I get out the second time. Now, I've been interviewing the residents when they come around at 5:30 in the morning. Now, anybody tells you can sleep in a hospital has not been in a hospital. But at 5:30 in the morning, the residents come, 7 o'clock, the fellows come, sometime later, the attending physician comes, and I'm asking questions. I get out the second time and start to study my blood work and my medications, and I came up with an algorithm you could predict when rejection would occur. I developed the symptoms a third time. I showed the data to the doctors. We changed the medication based on the data, and it worked. And it was my first clue that healthcare has all the data you could ever hope for. What they lack is all the information you need when you've got lives at stake and people having to make decisions in a time-critical framework. Fast forward now, the Harris Corporation buys the business that I was in, and Harris is a great place. I'll talk more about it in a second. I get to run business development for the government business. I get to see in pockets of the intelligence community, defense, what we do in the broadcast world, what we do for the FAA. And in the middle of this, it's just a fabulous accelerated learning curve. And the first transplant never settled into the normal range. So they're using a stent to sustain the liver function. So I have to go in every couple of weeks. I have this procedure done. I actually get to the point where I stop taking the anesthesia so I don't miss a day of work. I would go in, and I remember one time I'm having this procedure done, and it's a little bit painful, but you just sort of hold your breath for a while, and it works. And the doctor said, "Oh, yeah, tough guy. I'll bet you did your transplant surgery without any anesthesia." He's joking. I said, you get to the 7th or 8th hour of that thing, and you start thinking, I probably should have had something. I came home from trip one Friday night, and Gwen was supposed to go away with some friends to Williamsburg. She said, "I don't want to go. I'm worried you don't look well." I said, "It's one night. What could happen?" Well, it was that night. She went to Williamsburg. About midnight, I called Frank. I said, "Frank, something terrible's happening." He came and rushed me to the hospital. The last thing I remember, he was explaining that I'd had a transplant. And it turns out, as a result of the stent and all the things that were going on with the transplant, I had a serious infection called sepsis, and my organs were shutting down. I was dying. Frank calls Gwen and says, "You got to get back here. They're saying he's going to die tonight." By the time her friends can get her back, you can imagine the emotion and the pressure. Frank's sitting outside of my room with his head in his hands crying. They're trying to revive me with the paddles. I finally stabilized after about 3 weeks. I get transferred back up to Hopkins, knowing that I'm going to need another transplant. The doctors walk in. It's a very small room, and they said, "Look, we think you may have 2 weeks to live, but we can't start treatment until we get the last biopsy. We need the information so we can develop the protocol to figure out what's going on and treat you." Now, the pressure is extreme. My wife has to go back into Virginia, get the information, and bring it. I know that I have to pass every test. If I miss on one of these qualifying tests to get a transplant, I'm going to die, and we've got to get the information. I was in the hospital for a long time. When I finally got out, they said, "We don't know how you survived sepsis, but you'll never survive it twice. You're either going to get sepsis again or a second transplant." 18 months later, I'm at Harris running a business, and I get a call on my BlackBerry. Today's the day. It's 2 days in front of Thanksgiving, rush hour traffic. They say, "You got to get here right now." And you have a series of questions that you can ask, and I'm trying to go through the questions. He said, "Look, Dr. Pruitt says, today, if you want to, you need to come today." Now, I was told I'd probably die in the surgery. It was a high probability because of the trickiness, if you will, of I have to reconfigure internally to accommodate a deceased donor liver. But if I don't go, I'm probably going to die of sepsis. So I called, again, I start down this corridor. I called my parents and said goodbye. I called Gwen. I said, "Go get the kids." I called Frank. I leave him a message. I can't find him. I called Gwen's parents. I called the president of Harris. It's Bob Henry. He's a great guy. And Bob, he has a New Jersey accent. I always say he sounds more like Tony Soprano than Jack Welch. And he's talking to me. He's trying to encourage me. I'm driving home, and he said, "Don't worry, you're going to be fine. We'll take care of you." And I said, "Bob, if I die tonight, make sure that Gwen and the kids get whatever they have, what Harris can do for them. Make sure you cover them." And he said, "You know what?" He tells me he's going to send out a note and have the Harris people praying for me. I started to think about it. I said, "Probably 60-40 in my favor. Go ahead." So we get home, and then, you say goodbye to your kids. It's almost incredible. We prayed as a family for some other family who, in the midst of their grief, would be so selfless as to afford me a chance at life. And we drove to UVA. We got there, and the doctors ran some tests. They said, "There's some risks, but we think we should go for it." And so I said, "Let's go." And they said, "Can you walk to the operating room?" I'm in the gown. It's a little awkward. Got to go through the public spaces, but we're in a hurry. So I'm with Gwen, and we're walking from the 5th floor to the 2nd where the surgery would take place. I press the elevator door, and it's Frank. The only guy who knows what it's like to walk into that room. Came to say goodbye. Came to encourage me so I'd have the confidence to go in and and do what had to be done. I thanked them for the 1,000th time. I gave Gwen my ring and kissed her goodbye and went into the operating room. And they said, well, can you get up on the table? And I said to them, when do you people go on the clock? And I had, I don't want to be too dramatic here, but it's literally what happened. When you're at a point like this and you know you're probably going to die, and could be your last few minutes, you pray. And it was, if you could best be honored by taking my life, it's yours. But if you have a plan for me, wake me up, and I can't wait to serve you. The next thing I heard was Gwen's voice, and it was euphoria, not because I lived, but because I had a purpose. And I was only in the hospital a week, and the first thing I did when I got out was I wrote a letter to the Harris CEO, and I said, if we could move information in healthcare, like we do in the intelligence community at the edge of the network in Iraq and Afghanistan with lives at stake, if we could move it like we do for the FAA with 2 million passengers riding on our network every day, like we do with our tactical radios in theater with missions and lives at stake, we will save lives, we will make a difference, we might even be able to create a business. And 3 years ago, I was given that opportunity, and I want to tell you just a little bit about it. And I want to talk about what does all this mean in the context of taking what you want to do and becoming a transformational leader, and what does it mean to the rest of us as how we think about engaging in our day-to-day and trying to have impact not only in our business lives but in our personal lives. Harris is a great company, and I was trying to explain what is it that we do that's so unique that would allow us to go into healthcare and be meaningful. And it was this notion that we're trusted at the intersection of life and data in every market we serve. And healthcare is lacking a system context for how they share information. It's fragmented, it's paper-based. Even if we spend all the stimulus funds and digitize it, it's still going to be fragmented. It has to be connected. It was a lesson we learned out of 9/11. We had all the data, we didn't have the information. And we have to do better in healthcare. And here's the challenge. We've got $2+ trillion a year of our economy going towards this disintegrated, fragmented, last to catch up with all the things we're doing in IT and security and information management, and they're still doing it in paper, and it's escalating. It's our greatest threat to our economic and national security risk. And you don't think about it in these terms, but I want to share it with you. The answers exist in adjacent markets. And all we have to do is look back to the Cold War, and you'll see the example. When we were investing against the Soviets, it was we're staring at them, they're staring at us. We have to match, missile for nuclear missile in terms of investment to have the standoff. This military challenge, the solution existed somewhere else. In fact, we started to study the Soviet demographic and could see out of sociology they didn't have a sufficient teenage population to sustain their economy to support the military complex. So you had collaboration between then a Republican president and a democratically controlled Congress to up the ante. And we put in strategic defense. And it wasn't because we were going to have a shield overnight. It was because if we upped the ante, they wouldn't have the economic wherewithal to match it. So Gorbachev, who ascends to the top of the Communist Party, calls in Coca-Cola, brings him into Moscow, and tries to set up a capitalistic infrastructure. Not because he had a change of heart, because he had a change of need. And when Reagan stands in front of the Berlin Wall and says, Mr. Gorbachev, tear it down, he knew it was going to fall over if he didn't. And we won the Cold War because of the economic strength of the United States and our ability to outspend the Soviet Union. And today, the tables are reversed. The Chinese are holding our treasuries. Healthcare is consuming, and entitlements are consuming a disproportionate amount of our spending. We cannot afford to keep doing what we're doing. Something has to change. And the answer exists in adjacent markets, and the notion of bringing engineering discipline and IT discipline into healthcare will transform it. We will arrest the cost, we will improve the quality, and we will save lives. And it's fundamental to what we have to do as a country. And I want to say, as you're trying to engage in this transformational impact, you've got to be bold in your vision. It has to be something greater than you could ever do on your own, greater than you think is possible, so that people can engage and you get the brightest coming at this to solve the greatest challenges that we're facing. For us, if you want to change an industry, we've seen it in intelligence, we've seen it in defense, you've got to connect the infrastructure. Once you get it connected, you have to manage the information that flows over it, and then you've got to make sense out of that data so you can make better decisions. That's exactly what's needed in healthcare. We've got to get the right information to the right person, on the right device, at the point of care and benefits delivery. And if you have these bold aspirations, but you can't deliver results, all you have is an idea. You've got to be able to show progress. You've got to be able to make incremental steps and gains so that you can build momentum to drive towards a future state that's aspirational. And I want to just give you a couple quick examples. One is in this notion of sharing information, it was recognized nationally. We've got to come up with a framework that things get connected. Health and Human Services, out of the Office of the National Coordinator, said we've got to get the federal agencies to participate, and they turned to Harris to make it happen. We were able to connect 7 federal agencies with each other, the largest creators of health information, like Indian Health, Military Health, the VA, with the largest consumers, like Social Security, the CDC, and others. And then we know that over half our care for active duty and retired service members comes out of the private sector. So we've got to get the information in the private sector so we get a full continuity of care. So when wounded warriors are coming back stateside, they're getting the care they needed with full information. And now it's possible. In fact, just this week, this program received the Wall Street 2010 Award for Technology Innovation of the Year in Health IT. I'm extremely proud to be affiliated with it. We also looked at how do we take what's going on in the Defense Department, where we have more people being injured in this conflict, and how do we take care of them as they come back and transition through the health enterprise? So we're focused in the DoD, and what we learned was they can't get images out of theater. Someone's in an IED explosion, they come back to Walter Reed or stateside, we can't tell if they're getting better or worse. So in some instances, we even have to take them back into surgery because it's the only option. Well, when you look at what Harris does in theater, we're the #1 in the world in tactical radio communications. So we're moving now images over tactical radios. We set up the intelligence community. We make a request for imagery anywhere in the world, and we could deliver by finding that information and delivering it anywhere in the world, and any device authorized to see it in near real time. We took that technology, showed it to Military Health. 2 months after seeing it, there was an RFP. We responded in 2 weeks. They awarded it in 24 hours. We went and created an architecture out of the intelligence community to help better deliver care in the military complex. The answers are in adjacent markets. And we're doing some things on the commercial side, too, that are very exciting, leveraging IT and trying to transform care. The last encouragement I would give you is you be that transformation and lead it. I talk about the 2 best days in a person's life are the day you're born and the day you know why. And part of the way you discover that is doing everything you can to be prepared, like UMBC, like collaborating as executives to figure out how do we attack these national issues. And the other one is how do you engage your life experience, even the most difficult experiences, and figure out what are you uniquely capable of doing to make the biggest impact and marshaling all your effort in that direction. That you would live with a purpose. You have a mission, not a job. That you would learn from your past. That you would deliver in the present. And that you would lead to the future. And I want to ask that, you're here at UMBC, and all of us are trying to be great at what we do. You're trying to get educated and prepared so that you can go out and make a living. I ask that you take all you learn, all you know, and all that you are, and go make a difference. Thank you. Hey, let's spend a couple minutes. I don't know if you would have questions, but if you did, I'd love to entertain them and maybe pass them around the room for answers. So, any comments or thoughts? Sure. Yeah. They're in a slow transition where all 16,000 are coming into the healthcare business. No, it's for the whole company. I think it could be a very significant part. And the reason I say that is Harris has a very large research and development investment, most of it funded by the intelligence community to take the state-of-the-art in various disciplines and advance it or apply it in very unique ways. And in each of those areas, they have direct applicability into healthcare. So we have a great collaborative environment, a very technology-centric business. And what I'm trying to do is align those with healthcare experts and see how that technology could be deployed meaningfully into healthcare. And I could give you multiple examples, ranging from basic networks in hospitals all the way to things we're doing for improving radiation therapy, taking intelligence community ability to identify cloud shapes and do automatic 3D contouring, and change detection, where we could take a picture of a field on one day, come back a week later and take a picture of a field. Nothing in those pictures, but we could tell you everything that happened in between. We could tell you if somebody walked in the grass, drove on a street. And that change detection and the ability to contour, we showed that to some experts at the University of Pittsburgh. And they said, if you could put those two things together, you could help us do precision targeting for cancer treatment so that we actually hit the tumor and not healthy tissue. And we've come up with an answer for that. So that's an example, but there's a lot of looking across the company, and I've had a real fortunate background that I've been able to see across the different businesses. So I expect it to be a significant part of our portfolio. And if you listen to our CEO, he thinks the same thing. Sure.
Yeah, I was curious, how do you think we can help, or what companies or what the commercial space can do to help Harris in sort of going to the next level, moving in that direction?
You know, that's a great invite, and I'll take you up on it. And one of the things that we are trying to do is partner in as many dimensions as possible. I mean, Harris is a great company, but we are not the answer. We're part of the answer. And to go attack a national problem, you need to collaborate on a national scale. So we're trying to find out what are the best things that you could bring to this, and I would like for you to bring them to me. And then we will find ways to go attack priority problems in healthcare, again, to lower the cost, to improve the quality, and accelerate access to care and benefits. So we'd welcome that chance to collaborate. It's fundamental to what we're doing. Sure. The wireless world? I think the future of healthcare is going to be a lot like we saw in defense. You know, we went to a global information grid that everybody has an IP address, and you could find things and manage as a system. Ultimately, I think patients, there'll be a data grid, a virtual data grid that's secure and protects privacy that will follow the patient. So your information will be where you need it to be when you need it. And it will all be done wirelessly. You'll see devices in your home. You'll see passive systems as well as active systems that you engage, all of that in a network to provide better care and manage health. And I want to say one more thing here about the wireless world. It won't be just to bring you back from acute conditions like I've had. It will be to keep you well longer. We'll begin to get at information because we've got these variety of sources and the ability to mine the information that, in my case, we might say, look, you're going to need a transplant when you're 30s, when you're 25, start taking this medication, and we could delay it maybe a decade or two. And all of that will be a knowledge-centric, data-centric grid fueled by wireless capability. That's clearly the future. Sure. Yes. We're involved at the National Cancer Institute, working clinical trials. We've also participated in creating technology to fuel multidisciplinary clinics so we can get collaboration, both virtually as well as in co-located sites, so that experts could look at a particular patient, and we virtualize the experts and the patients to make all of that possible. But we are looking at not just moving information by way of infrastructure, but also making sense out of it in a proactive way, actually. And one of the key programs is our work at the National Cancer Institute. Sure. The question was, how are the disciplines at UMBC, how could they be applied in a Harris world? Information management is the transformation that is needed in healthcare. So let me answer it in a little bit of a circuitous way, but it'll come back. When we just extended coverage to everybody in the U.S., we are the last industrialized nation to do so. And you'd say, you just have to. But it's only part of the answer. You've got to get to two more steps. One is you've got to improve the quality, and you must lower the cost. Our economic viability and our national security depend on it. So you can't just do the one and increase the cost. The only way to get at that, and OMB has said, if you can create a connected framework for healthcare, you could take out 1/3 of the federal spend. Forget the politics. Just with a connected framework. That's an IT-based care delivery model. So you need IT expertise, network expertise, information management, software engineering, all the disciplines, the systems level thinking applied to a healthcare context. All of those things are represented at UMBC. I think you have the opportunity to have a phenomenal role in shaping the future of where healthcare goes. Yes, please.
This is more of a personal question, but since you spoke so much about your personal life,
Sure.
I don't know if you want to indulge me. I'm interested in people, successful people, and how they make a nice work-life balance. And I was wondering if you could speak to that in terms of, you said you have your family, you're obviously a person of faith, and you're obviously a very successful business person. And tell us a little bit, give us like a snapshot of a day in the life now.
This might turn into a confession more than advice. First thing I would say is I married up. My wife, even my friends when I was playing basketball, they would say, "Oh, Traff, you ought to go date Gwen." And it was with the idea like there is no statistical possibility for that ever occurring. And it happened. And I thought the same thing. So I definitely married up. We've been married 26 years, and she has loved me to life. When most would have quit, she did not. And I would say if you were to look at the stability of our family and the way our children are doing, I would credit Gwen. The other thing is I work in a very ethical, people-oriented, high-integrity company. I mean, there's pressure to deliver results, but not at all cost, and certainly not at the cost of you individually. So we do struggle. I'm going to be honest. I struggle with the amount of time that I put into my work and how much time I put at home. I try to put in lots of hours on the road and cut back when I'm in town, and that's basically how I manage it. But it's a great question, and I'll tell you something that I ask myself routinely. Yeah, thank you. Sure. What are you doing for lunch? I would say my email address is jim.traficant, 1F, Traficant, at harris.com. I will get back to you. And what we're looking for are ideas. The other thing that we do that I think it creates an advantage for us, we have a customer briefing center where we get to showcase various technologies from around our company. And we bring clinical experts in to review that technology. And rather than us tell them, here's what we could do for you, we ask them, what could this technology, if it were applied in your context, how could it be meaningful? And we end up coming up with solutions we would have never created on our own by co-creating with industry experts. So I'd really welcome the input. That'd be terrific. Sure.
Actually, I can help him on that. I've been involved in healthcare integration, electronic medical record for 25 years. And when it comes to healthcare technology, one of the things I've noticed since the early 70s and involved in that is if you think of technology as a train, and Bill Gates and all these guys are in the engine, healthcare is not the boxcars, it's not the caboose, it's the pumper car chasing the caboose. It's slow to adapt new technology because it's open. I see things now that I saw 10 years ago that I thought, that should be in here. So it needs people to bring that technology in to say, how do I find a way to move that technology into healthcare? There's a lot of other reasons. I could spend a whole lunchtime telling you things.
I look forward to it.
But the main problem is that you have to then make sure that the application meets FDA guidelines and all
Yeah.
that stuff. But you can, if you're forward thinking and thinking outside of the box, bring a lot of this technology you use every day. And I mean, doctors are just now using PDA, just now.
Right. I think one of the great opportunities for us is a number of us in the room have actually participated in the transformation or the inflection point in a variety of industries. And so the lessons learned from those other markets, again, would apply directly here as we try to accelerate this adoption curve for electronic health information and exchange. Great point. Any other questions? Hey, thanks very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ron. Thanks. Don't leave yet. Whoops. I know I made something down here. Jim, thanks a lot. I was actually, when I had time to look at the audience, everybody was fixed on this presentation. It's truly your passion and commitment. And actually, I think probably the most important thing is it tells us how we as technologists can have an impact on things that affect people's lives. Again, some more promotion. But I hope you'll accept this and remember your time with us here at UMBC today. It's been a true pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
And I want to thank all of you in the audience. I hope you get a chance to catch Jim's ear with some of the ideas and make those connections. It's wonderful to have all of you here with us today, but put this on your calendar. November 17th, we'll convene again. Our speaker will be Peter Junk, who's the founder and Chief Technology Officer for Cloud Shield Technologies. And hope to see you again at that time, and thank you very much for coming out this morning. Thank you.